You're at a sports game. Your face is painted blue and gold. You're screaming things you'd never say at work. You feel it. That strange electricity, like you're bigger than yourself, like the rules have shifted. Now ask yourself, weird. Why does paint do that? Why does changing your face change your mind? That question is 100,000 years old. The answer has almost nothing to do with sports. It has everything to do with survival, with war, with what it actually takes to make a human being willing to die for the person standing next to them. Here's where this starts. Not in a war, not on a battlefield. In a cave on the southern coast of South Africa, Blombos Cave, archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood found 2 abalone shells inside, dated to 100,000 years ago. Inside those shells, a mixture, crushed red ochre, bone, charcoal, fat, deliberately ground and blended into a paste. A paint kit. There was no metal, no writing, no architecture. But there was this. Humans were already engineering color to put on bodies. That's not decoration. That's a decision. Color on skin meant something important enough to prepare for. Now, zoom out. When these people painted their bodies, they weren't strangers. They were groups of 25 to 50 people who had known each other their entire lives. Every scar, every story, every debt. You hunted together, you slept near the same fire, you watched each other's children learn to walk. And then conflict came, over territory, over resources, over a wrong that couldn't be ignored, and you had to go fight, together, against people just like you. That is the world where war paint was born. Not armies of thousands, just you and 10 people you love walking towards something that might kill all of you. Among the Plains tribes of North America, war paint wasn't something you grabbed before a fight. It was sacred. Warriors fasted before they painted. They prayed. An elder or medicine person would bless the paint itself. One native account described it clearly. Their prayers were put into the paint. The paint carried those prayers into the warrior's body. Red meant strength, power, survival for the tribe. Lightning bolts meant speed. Crossed arrows meant conflict survived. A warrior's face was a living document, a story of who they were, what they had survived, or what they were calling on right now. Every line had a reason. Here's the part that gets me. Anthropologist Roy Rappaport argued that ritual works like a control system, a structured way to reliably flip people into a shared psychological state. And the painting ritual does exactly that. It's slow, deliberate, social. While the paint goes on, warriors tell stories. They invoke ancestors. They breathe the same air around the same fire. Each step prepares the nervous system for something it would otherwise reject. Because here's the truth. Going to war is massively maladaptive for an individual human brain. Your brain wants to run. War paint is one of the oldest tools that helps push the switch the other way. Modern psychology has a name for what happens when you paint your face. De-individuation. When people feel anonymous, visually merged with a group, normal moral rules start to bend. Philip Zimbardo studied this with uniforms and masks. The results were unsettling. People became capable of things their ordinary self would refuse. War paint does this deliberately. It erases the individual. It replaces them with something larger. Not John, who gets nervous and second-guesses himself, but the warrior. The tribe made flesh. The paint doesn't trick you into courage. It gives your brain a new identity to perform. One that already knows how to do this. One that isn't afraid. And then there's what it does to the enemy. Julius Caesar wrote about it directly. The Britons dyed their bodies with woad, making them appear bluish and terrifying in battle. Roman geographer Pomponius Mela recorded it too. Modern historians note that woad is actually a poor body paint. Kaider sedio, Carlinti Thanina, Charles de Corporils and Diginant Dontradit. So what Caesar likely saw was something closer to permanent tattoos. Either way, aren't sure the effect was real. These warriors looked inhuman, otherworldly. Combat, your brain floods with adrenaline. It misreads faces. It amplifies threats. And then you see that. Something that no longer looks like a person. Your focus collapses. And that half second of hesitation can end a fight. Now, here's something most people don't realize. War paint was never only for war. Among Plains tribes and across dozens of cultures, the same pigments, red ochre, white clay, were used for mourning, for healing, for coming-of-age rites, for shamanic rituals. The cognitive link wasn't paint equals violence. It was paint equals crossing a threshold, entering a different state, becoming someone your ordinary life doesn't require you to be. War was just the sharpest version of that threshold. But the human need underneath, the need to ritually mark transformation, that was constant, universal, across every continent, every era, every culture that left a trace. Anthropologist Lawrence Keeley studied this carefully. His book, War Before Civilization, argued something uncomfortable. In some small-scale prehistoric societies, 10 to 20% of male deaths came from violent conflict. 10 to 20%. Compare that to modern nation-states across the entire 20th century, including both world wars, where roughly 1 to 2% of male deaths came from war. Think about that slowly. The people doing this ritualized, painted, prayed over combat. They died from it at rates that would horrify us. War paint wasn't theater. It wasn't tradition for its own sake. It was survival technology. In a world where violence could wipe out your bloodline, anything that made you more effective and your enemy more afraid was worth every prayer put into it. Now here is where it connects to you. Modern science has a concept called enclothed cognition. Studies show that what you wear, a lab coat, a uniform, a jersey, physically changes how your brain performs. Attention shifts, aggression shifts, confidence shifts. War paint is the oldest, most visceral version of this. When you paint your face for war, you do 3 things at once. You send a signal to yourself, I am now someone who can do this. You send a signal to your allies, I am with you. I share your fate. And you send a signal to your enemies. I have been touched by something beyond ordinary life. 3 messages, 1 face, delivered in seconds. And here's what we've lost. Ancient war paint marked a threshold, a clear line between who you were and who you needed to become. That moment was public, shared, embodied. Every person in the group witnessed your transformation. Modern life has almost none of that. Most of us go from scrolling a phone to emotionally intense work with nothing in between. No ritual, no buffer, no signal to ourselves or anyone else that we've crossed a line. We still have faint echoes, sports face paint, military boot camp, even a makeup routine, but they rarely carry shared sacred meaning. The result? We spend most of our lives psychologically unswitched, not fully on, not fully off, just in between, perpetually in between. And there's a deeper loss underneath that. In a band of 30 people, your identity wasn't something you had to figure out. Everyone already knew your story. It was mirrored back constantly through shared memory, shared ritual, shared paint. Modern psychologists call it identity anxiety. That low hum of, who am I really? It's a modern epidemic, and it's not a personality flaw. It's what happens when you remove the social scaffolding that identity was always built on. We now construct identity through avatars, logos, fashion, thin masks that change weekly. Our ancestors painted over something solid, a lifelong tribe, a face everyone recognized. The paint intensified what was already there. We keep searching for what to put underneath. Our ancestors didn't paint their faces because they were primitive. They painted their faces because they understood something we've quietly forgotten. To face death, or grief, or transformation, you must first change who you are. And the simplest, oldest way to change who you are is to start with what you see in the mirror. They used ochre and ash and charcoal. They used prayers pressed into pigment. They used the eyes of people who loved them, watching as the paint went on. We traded all of that for algorithms that do the identity switching for us, for brands and feeds and filtered faces that reshape how we feel without us ever deciding. They hacked their own minds, consciously, deliberately, together. We let ours be hacked, and we don't even feel it happening.